I remember particularly one story that really did it for me, and it was this young gal that I met in the inner city of Vancouver, British Columbia, Canada. And she shared that she had been on the street since she was 12 years old. That's when she turned her first trick on the streets of the inner city of Vancouver. And she had had a lot of disturbing things happen to her as a child, and she was running from that and ended up in that part of town and was taken in and given drugs and then turned out on the street. So before her 13th birthday, she turned her first trick, and she was out on those streets until she was 25 years of age. And I met her a few years after that. She was 28, I believe, when I met her. And she had explained to me that in all those years that she was out on the street, that she never once heard from anyone in any way that she had value or worth as a person. And she said, when you live that lifestyle in the sex traffic industry, the sex trade industry, you're just like no good. That's how you see yourself. That's how other people see you. Like you have no value and no worth. And she said that there would be times that Christians would approach her on the street, but not to tell her that she had worth or that she was loved, but to say that if you don't change your ways, you're going to hell. And that just reinforced her lack of value. She didn't want to be trapped in a drug addiction. She didn't want to be trapped in prostitution, but that was all that she knew from 12 years of age. And so she just believed that she had no worth until one day this young Christian gal came. She was on an outreach, an evangelism outreach, and she came to her on the street and she looked at her and smiled. And this young prostitute was telling me, this ex-prostitute was telling me, you know, I didn't even know what to do with that, because it was the first time that I felt inside my heart that maybe there was hope for me. She said, I will never, ever forget that smile. I will never forget it, because it said to me, you are loved and you have value. And she said, I wrestled. I was uncomfortable with it in some ways because I didn't know what to do with that. And I'll never, ever forget that smile. Then she proceeded to tell me that the very next day, another gal from that same outreach team came and was in tears and making appeals to her, saying, if you will just come off these streets, you know, you can have a brand new life. If you will, you have too much value in you to be out here, being used by men in this way. And so, the gal said, well, I can't leave these streets because I've got 3 children to look after. And of course, she was lying. She wasn't out there to look after her children. In fact, she confessed to me that she was a very neglectful mother. She would lock her children up in the house with a box of cereal, and the baby was in the crib crying, and the kids were looking after themselves. Well, she locked the doors, closed the blinds, and said, don't leave this place until I get back. And sometimes that was hours and hours and hours, because she needed to go out and make money for her drug habit. That was the bottom line. But she told this young gal, I can't leave the streets because of my children. And the girl in tears said to her, if you will please come off these streets. God loves you so much. If you will come off these streets, I will commit to looking after the financial need, to look after your children and the rent on your house and everything that is needed until you can get help. And so that day, this gal who had been prostituting for years came off the streets. She'd been on the streets for over 12 years. And because of love, she decided to come off. And so she went into the home, and the young girl went to her church. It was a small church of under 100 people. And the church took on the project together. They raised the money. They looked after the children. They helped this girl get the medical attention she needed. And they just loved her. And so much love was poured out on her that she actually gave her heart to the Lord a few days into this. And then the church put her into a rehab program for, I think it was almost a year, and looked after her children in the meantime. And this girl, who was once a prostitute, was now taken out of the dung heap and set amongst the princes of the earth. And when I met her, she'd been off the streets for 3 years, and she explained to me how hard it was living on those streets. She said oftentimes, you'd overdose in an alley and people would just step over you. Nobody cared about you. Nobody saw a prostitute's value. And she was sharing me these heart-wrenching stories that broke my heart. And she'd been off the streets for 3 years, and she had just gone back onto the streets when I met her. I met her in the inner city of Vancouver. She had gone back to the streets, but not as a prostitute anymore, not as a drug addict, but as a minister of God's love. And she was walking the alleys and walking the streets and reaching out and bringing the girls in off the street. And it just touched me so much. And I said, God, one life, just knowing your love is so important. Just one life. Just if we could touch one life, it is so important. And so we began to give ourselves more and more in raising up teams to go out on the street. Well, then I heard about the jugular of the sex trade industry, especially sex tourism, was in a city called Pattaya, Thailand. So we took a scouting trip over there. I just wanted God's heart for it and to have him infuse me with his heart. And that's when, as walking the streets, I saw girl after girl, bar after bar, brothel after brothel, and started hearing the testimonies of girls who had been raised in small villages as children and just enjoying their childhood. And they didn't know they were poor, but they were just being kids, enjoying life. And then finding out one day that an offer had been made to the parents by someone from the city saying, if you give us one of your children, we can give them a job in the big city. It'll be a breakthrough for them. And maybe even a man from America or from Europe will come and marry them, and then they'll look after your family. And most of those parents didn't know that they were giving their children over to prostitution. But I remember sitting in the bar with one girl. She was about 15 or so. She was supposed to be 18 legally to work in the bars, but I knew that she wasn't. She was just a child. And she, in tears, shared with me her story with our interpreter that was with us. And she remembers being sold into the bars and didn't even know what she was going for. She was a virgin when she first went. And she said she remembered the first time that she was with a man, and it was terrifying for her. They'd given her some drugs to help her with that. And she just explained the terror of being in that kind of lifestyle. My heart broke. I said, we're going to do something to help you. We're going to do something to help other girls like you. And so God gave us a plan to just take whatever Christians would be interested in going and loving people to life, one life at a time. And so we go into the bars and love the girls, and we started hosting banquets where we would go and pay for the girls to come out of the bars for the night. And we would set this banquet feast for them in a beautiful hotel with the best meal that we could have. And we'd raise the money ahead of time, and we'd buy all of them roses, and we'd give gifts to them. And we prophesied destiny over each one, because most of them didn't know a personal living God who loved them and who saw value in them. When you're sold into prostitution by your family, there's a message that goes into your mind that says, I don't have value, I don't have worth, I'm good for nothing, and my life is worth nothing now. But when you come to know the living God and that he sees value in you, it just changes everything. And so girl after girl would weep and weep and weep in these banquets. And we worked with a ministry, and still do, over in Thailand, who disciples girls. They're willing to take them out of the bars immediately and train them in making cards or hairdressing or bakery work or whatever, and they pay them money if they'll come out of the bars, pay them an income to look after them and a little bit to send home to the family. And it's just beautiful what happens. So every time we host one of these banquets, many girls give their hearts to Jesus Christ, the King of Love. Many of them come to know a true bridegroom king who loves them for who they are and not for what is taken from them. But many of those girls, even, we can get into these discipleship programs, and it's our delight to testify that some of those girls who are discipled through the Tamar Center in Pattaya, Thailand, that is a wonderful ministry that we highly endorse, that they get trained to then go back into their villages after a while, preach the gospel, and oftentimes establish churches and get a good part of the village, if not all of them, born again.
Your passion that beats for Christ alone. Your passion.
even in America, we work with local ministries that are getting girls out of the sex trade, and boys. There's boys that get sold into the sex trade and for male prostitution, but also transgender prostitution. And it is a multi-billion-dollar industry, actually worldwide, the whole sex trade. And many are trapped in it and stolen. Even locally in America, girls right now are being abducted and taken into the sex trade, taken even from the schoolyards. They'll have vans going around and they literally abduct girls, like saying, come, or they'll offer them a modeling job, or saying, I'm a talent scout and I was just looking at you and I see great potential, and they'll make an appointment with them as a talent scout and then eventually lead them into prostitution. Some of them disguise as boyfriends. Young guys are actually paid by leaders in the sex trade to go and befriend the girls and become boyfriends, and then the boyfriend leads them to the sex trade leader, and they get put into prostitution that way. It's definitely organized crime. There's cartels, sex trade cartels that operate even from city to city, and once they abduct them in one city, they can send them to another, and there's a whole network of sex trade cartels in America. Much of this is used on the internet, and I hate to have to say this, but a lot of it is like snuff pornography. Also, some of it in front of the camera and some of it just on the outside. Once they're finished with the girls, they get killed. And many children are abducted. Child pornography is becoming a big, big, big industry. And children are being abducted. Many of the children, unfortunately, that you see on the missing children's sites, many of them are being abducted into sex trade. And this is something that we really need to pray for. Over in Thailand right now, we're just establishing a shelter for children being rescued out of the brothels. There was a report a while back of a brothel being busted by the police, and they caught 3 Western men with a 2-month-old baby that they were having sexual interaction with. And it sounds deplorable, it sounds impossible, but even as we're sitting here talking right now, this is taking place. Even in America, things like that are taking place. When you are traumatized through that kind of sexual interaction, what happens oftentimes is that there's disassociation, and demonic entities enter in through the perpetrator, through the different clients that come in, but also through your own fears, your anger, your own responses. It's a landing strip for the enemy to take even further advantage. So yes, people that are rescued from that kind of trauma are highly demonized oftentimes and emotionally broken. The good news is that out of Isaiah 61, it says the Spirit of the Sovereign Lord has anointed us to bring release to the captives and to bind up the brokenhearted, so those broken pieces can come together. But there's more and more people now getting trained in dealing with these situations, but we need to trust God for a move of His grace. It says in the Bible, where sin abounds, grace that much more abounds. And right now, we need to call forth extreme grace, abundant grace, over-the-top grace to enable us to miraculously deal with these situations. In Thailand, what we're doing is we have connections with the medical profession, because a lot of the children are being trafficked in from Cambodia into Thailand. And they have lost their identity. They don't have passports. It's even hard to get them back into Cambodia once we rescue them. And so we're working with the UN. We're working with the police department. We're working with medical teams, because some of them, and this is hard to say also, but some of them need a lot of physical treatment to their bodies. Some of them are greatly diseased with sexually transmitted diseases. As children, as young people, are filled with disease, so that needs to be treated. And sadly to say, some of them even need reconstruction surgeries because of damage done to the rectum and other parts of the body. And God cares about every part of the body. He cares about the spiritual well-being, the spiritual rescue, the emotional rescue, the mental torment rescue, the physical rescue. He loves us spirit, soul, and body. And so we have to be committed to the full measure of treatment that is needed. And we can just take one day at a time and one step at a time with that. But if our heart is willing to reach out, God will give us what is needed. He says he will meet all of our needs according to his riches and glory by Christ Jesus. So if the need is that we need medical help, he will meet that need. If the need is that we need deliverance, he will meet that need. And he is a great God.
Your passion that beats for Christ alone.
There's a testimony of what we call a ladyboy over in Thailand before they get saved. These are men that are born boys. God created them boys. They have all the sexual organs of a boy. They have the body parts of a boy. But they are trained from childhood to live like a girl. Their parents oftentimes, right from childhood, will dress them in little girl dresses and put nail polish on them and teach them mannerisms of a girl, and sometimes purposely to raise them as prostitutes, because a ladyboy gets more money than a regular prostitute and can raise money for the family. And we have heard, in fact, I remember these two young ladyboys that I met in one of their centers that they had, and I just sat down with them one night and I said, just share your heart with me, and they did, and I shared the gospel with them, the love of Jesus, the good news, and brought them to church the next day. And over the next week they got saved. Both of them got saved, and they didn't immediely change the way that they dressed or acted, but they came to know Jesus as their Savior. They had had surgery, so they had treatments that gave them their breasts and that, so they had completely identified as girls. But why they came to him is because they first encountered him. They told me how they felt his love, and that they'd never felt love like that before. They had this body encounter with Jesus Christ. Both of them had this with Jesus Christ, and that is what made them feel safe enough to come to him, knowing that he would love them for whoever they were. And then over time they grew in fellowship, in church fellowship. And this is our God. They do know that he created them as males now, that they are created as males. And so it is a process, but it is growing. Yes, there are definitely dangers, but the people in the sex trade, they live in danger every single day, every single moment of their life. The children that are sold into the kiddie stroll brothels, they're in danger every single day by the hour. And so to be in danger as one who rescues is a small price to pay, really, to rescue those that are in danger every moment. And we do feel the protection of the Lord and the hiddenness of the Lord. And I have seen, for those that work like Annie and the Tamar Center, that are actually known in the city as those that do rescue, I've seen God protect them. Have there been incidences of danger in their lives? Yes. But they are lovers of God and lovers of those who are the victims of these crimes. So they just they're laid down lovers, and they're willing to lay their life down, and even being put in dangerous situations in order to see these people touched and rescued. So there are dangers, but God's covering. He is covering, and he is hiding them as well. And you can feel the grace when you meet these ministries that are right in there. And it's the same with when we do work in the inner city. It is dangerous. The pimps are watching you and things like that. But we know when we have that covering, that protection, that shield, and you can feel it. It's like a bubble around you. God's Psalm 91 is a really true word from the Lord. I feel like there's those of you that are watching this that maybe in your past that you suffered either sexual abuse or maybe were a victim of the sex trade, and maybe you're watching right now and you are trapped right now and don't know that there's a way out. But Jesus is the door to freedom. He really is. I can't imagine even what you must be feeling right now. I can't imagine the fullness of the pain, but I know one who does know it, and he's intimately acquainted with what you're suffering in. And he's reaching out his hand to you right now, and he's saying, just come and draw close. Put your head on his chest. Put your head next to him. Let his arms embrace you. You are loved and you have value. And he's going to take you out of the dung heap of the pain and the shame and the guilt and set you amongst the princes of the earth. Don't be afraid to tell someone what's happening to you. Don't be afraid to call for help. Don't be afraid of the threats that have come against you. Don't be afraid. He is with you. He will cover you. He will protect you. He will put you in that bubble that is talked about in Psalm 91, where he covers you with his feathers. Why? Because he loves you. Your life can change right now, out of the darkness into the light, out of hatred into love. God has great things for you. He cares. Reach out. Jesus, I pray right now that your power would touch that life right now and bring healing and deliverance and the removal of shame and guilt and fear. Let his love touch you right now. He is love.